every time we looked at our balance sheet for Bitcoin, we'd go, this is the best thing we've ever done. It just grows and grows. Yeah, it's a short-term volatility, but if we're looking at it compared to everything else, it's held up and performed so well. The last thing we want to do is get rid of it, but also what can we do with it?
How does a post-production company made up of world-class designers and artists take control of its financial future? And how does Bitcoin fuel its stability and growth? We discuss this in today's episode with Forager co-founders Ali and Carlos. We hope you enjoy, and as a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only. If you enjoy the content, please remember to like, follow, or share, as this all helps us greatly. Lynne and Israel are partners at Base Layer Advisors, where they employ their strong network of venture capital partners and startups to connect investors with unique opportunities within the Bitcoin innovation space. Alongside this, they support founders with their strategic growth and fundraising goals. Visit our website's advisory section to learn more. Welcome to Build with Bitcoin. I'm co-host Israel Munoz, joined with co-host Lynn Bairstow. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Carlos and Ali from Forager. Welcome, guys, first of all.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, we're particularly excited. We came across the X announcement not too long ago. This was what, you guys made it a week or two ago? Is that right?
A little bit of a Yep.
And it read something along the lines of New York City post-production studio goes on a Bitcoin standard. And then you dig into Forager and you see big names that you guys have worked with on the creative side, HBO, Oscars, Super Bowls, lots of very interesting things on the creative end. And it's a very different episode that we're doing today because we normally focus more on Bitcoin specific technology. However, you guys decided to, as a small private company, or not so small, but as a private company, to adopt a Bitcoin standard. And we, of course, want to get into all of those aspects today. But as a starting point, Carlos and Ali, maybe you can kick us off with telling us a little bit about what your business does. What is this collective concept that Forager works on, and a little bit of background on your industry?
Sure. I'll start with this one. So Carlos and I founded Forager in January 2019 after we'd been working together. I was staff at a post house, had been staff, up until this point where I thought, I'm going to try my own freelance, life, because I was getting ready to make a move from New York. And Carlos and I were talking about, making this leap, and he'd been freelancing his whole career. So we had two different paths up until this point, and how he was seeing a need for the post-production, post-producer services that a post house gives to artists. But for freelancers, there's so much talent out there, and only a small amount of talent had been captured in the traditional post house setup. And there was, at that time, also emerging technologies that were making it possible for this vast talent network to be connected with clients in a whole new way. You didn't have to be in person all the time, with creatives to get the job done. So we decided to continue to work together after I'd gone freelance, and it snowballed into more artist representation as I worked with more editors and colorists, and we decided to form Forager and continue to expand this network and bring on more producers, and just provide this kind of support to freelancers without asking them to give up the freedoms they have as a freelancer, and the branding that they had worked so hard to put forward for their own work and services. So yeah, we called ourselves a virtual post house for a long time. Still pretty much applies, and I guess you could think of us as a decentralized post house if we're going to use Bitcoin, terms a bit. And that continues today. We've got a global presence, and we support artists in all disciplines of post-production.
And because our audience is probably a little less familiar with the creative side of it, so that you're dealing with video, TV, audio, music, things like this. So it's the whole realm of creative. So for advertisements and for promotional work, is that correct? I just want to be kind of a little more clear about who would use your services and what some of the finished products would be.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for that because you're right. And it's funny for me because this is more of a new space. So for me, I'm like, oh, could you repeat that? What does this term really mean? So for our services in post production, our clients are advertising agencies. We primarily, we also work with production companies. Anyone who needs editing, color, music, visual effects, finishing so that the product can go out into the world. We do a lot of branded content, a lot of social, commercial work, music videos, and we've done short narrative feature films. We have a couple of films that we were involved with that will be at the Tribeca Film Festival this year. So it spans a bit of everything.
Great. And then Israel mentioned that you had an announcement about going on a Bitcoin standard, and this related to having Bitcoin in your treasury, Bitcoin on your balance sheet, and using that. And we'll get into that in a little bit in more detail, but obviously both of you are Bitcoiners. And so we always like to start also with how you came to discover Bitcoin and what it means to you. And the two of you, like, how did you make that decision? We want to hear the backstory, but also about how you both decided to make Bitcoin a part of your agency.
Yeah, I can take this one. It was back in March of 2020, in the middle of, the pandemic shock, that I personally was just looking for some stock tips online on YouTube, and just kind of seeing, like, just, you were hearing about the market crash and like how, like, they were preparing to issue, like a lot of liquidity, like central banks. So I was just honestly thinking about, okay, maybe there's opportunity here to buy some stocks. And I stumbled upon this interview with Preston Pysh on YouTube. First time I'd ever seen him. And I didn't know anything about him, but I remember the interviewer being like, Preston, everyone knows you as the stock guy. You're telling me you don't have any equities right now? And he was like, no, like, why would I own equities when all these companies operate on a fiat standard? And I didn't know what any of that meant, but it just made me intrigued. And so, I just went down like a mini rabbit hole from there. And I think a couple days later, I bought my first Bitcoin just to try it, and just I had heard about the halving, it's about to happen. And this all sounds very techy, but cool. And of course, Ali and I are very good friends, and I gave some unsolicited financial advice to Ali, being like, you should get one of these too. Because it sounds like it's going to go up. So very speculative, like we just thought it was an opportunity there. And, I'm sure you guys have, like once you hold this thing and you see it moving in all directions and you just get curious, so you want to learn more. And I think it was June of 2020 where we were like, our logic was, we own now some Bitcoin personally. Should we just buy one on behalf of Forager? And we do it. And then I think the following month we just get another one because you have to have two once you have one. So it was really just that simple, like kind of logic is like, why not? This seems to be like have like a good upside. And just, I believe it was August that Michael Saylor emerges in Bitcoin Twitter, and he announces that his company is buying all these millions and putting all their reserves into Bitcoin. And that's when we were like, okay, maybe there's something serious about this. And I think from that point, we just set up like a dollar cost average automatically for us. And thankfully, we had some reserves at Forager, and they were just sitting there in the bank, collecting almost like 0%. So we were like, we might as well just start buying some of this. But as again, there was no more than that, just kind of pure speculation in the beginning. And then, the orange pilling comes gradually after that.
I do want to interrupt you and point out that you were ahead of Michael Saylor in putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet of Forager. You did that. But
exactly,
that's crazy.
yeah.
That's amazing. I had thought that perhaps the two of you were Bitcoiners a while before you decided to put it in the company, but it was all at the same time. That's great. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I love the story. And you need to get on Preston's podcast, by the way. At some
that would be the dream. And of course, now I know all about Preston. Like, it's like he's the GOAT. So of course.
and Ali, by the way, out of curiosity, what was your initial reaction to Carlos's unsolicited advice? I mean, what was your initial, journey into Bitcoin?
Well, Carlos said we're very good friends, and I trust Carlos with my life. And I'd heard a little bit about Bitcoin, and like I said, we had reserves. We were looking to diversify, what we had in savings at that point. And I thought, why not? I remember when we were, I don't know if we were sitting, well, we couldn't have been sitting next to each other yet. I'd already moved. We were across each other's computer screens. He'd sent me a ledger. I think it was for my birthday or something. And I'm like, what is it? You can send me a whole Bitcoin themed birthday box. And I, at the time, was still very much like naive, didn't know a whole lot about this. And you walked me through sending a Bitcoin. And so we did that transaction. I'm like, well, that is incredible. I still am not entirely sure what I'm going to do with this now, but it really, really made me interested. I remember when you pointed out that this company called MicroStrategy was buying this Bitcoin. And so I have these memories of when we first started, diversifying Foragers, or like our combined profits into something that could perform down the road for us. And like Carl said, we didn't know what that meant, but we were pragmatic in that, we're having a great couple of years, but every company, especially as one as new as ours, will eventually come to a point where the years aren't as great. Maybe we're going through a rocky patch, and maybe we can talk a little bit late, in a bit about what we're facing right now and why this has become such an important tool for us. But we're just looking to make sure our savings grew and would support us down the line for whatever that meant, growth or just sustaining our operations. So in all honesty, Bitcoin was like that was when it became like a hobby. I'd check every once in a while. I would sometimes just like remind myself where I put my ledger. Is that kind of like, oh, where is that thing? And then when we were, in the last month, like looking at our investments and our assets, and every time we looked at our balance sheet for Bitcoin, we'd go, this is the best thing we've ever done. It just grows and grows. Yeah, it's a short-term volatility, but if we're looking at it compared to everything else, it's held up and performed so well. The last thing we want to do is get rid of it, but also what can we do with it? And then I guess we can, talk about what we have done with it. But for me, my Bitcoin journey has really just begun.
Build with Bitcoin is a proud affiliate partner of River, a Bitcoin-only financial services company that I've personally been using for years. I really enjoy the strong focus they have on security and reliability, which ultimately leads to peace of mind. I know you're a big fan as well.
I am. I feel so confident referring people to River, in addition to what you mentioned. Also, they've got US-based phone support, which I think for somebody who's less familiar with the space or used to personal service is really helpful. In addition, they have a private client services division. So if you're looking to invest $100,000 or more, They have a special suite of services designed for you, whether you're a high net worth individual, a family office, or a trust. I also really appreciate the continued improvements they make in the back end so that reliability and security continues to be really apparent.
They additionally also have US dollar cash deposits paid out in Bitcoin. They have a yield product for that, which is an interesting alternative way of accumulating Bitcoin. Overall, fantastic suite of services. If you're interested in onboarding or opening up an account at River, use partner.river.com/buildwithbitcoin for personalized onboarding.
Something that I'd like to get a better understanding of, the problem. I mean, what the creative industry is perhaps going through right now. I mean, I think as a young company, it's naturally difficult to grow and to know how to manage your resources. And of course, Bitcoin, we'll get into why that's such a powerful tool. But for the creatives industry, what do you guys observe, Carlos and Ali, as far as economic cycles? I mean, we're going through some very uncertain times. Inflation, depending on where you are in the world, is stronger or weaker than others. But in general, how do economic cycles affect your particular colleagues, and why is this problem so relevant to other companies?
Yeah. So our industry is very susceptible to these economic cycles. I think Forager is just a little over 5 years old, and we have we've seen COVID and the lockdowns where everything shut down completely. And so if film shoots aren't happening, we're not getting work. The first part of the pandemic, we were sustained a little bit just by the work we'd already been doing. But then it dries up because the work that we rely on isn't being done. But then once COVID safety procedures have been put into place and stimulus was being pumped into the economy to get businesses back to work, and grants were being provided to small businesses, then there's this expansion of work and people are spending and comfortable using the money that's being provided to them to continue operating, which is great in the short term, right? And we had crazy couple of years right after that. And then we see the effects of that stimulus, and then things start to contract again, and budgets are being cut. At the same time, we're battling those market forces. AI comes bursting onto the scene, and now there is an expectation that a lot of the work that we do in our post-production industry with the editing and, music and visual effects and can be done very quickly and very cheaply, which is a misunderstanding of what the AI tools can do or will do, or how they actually can benefit our industry. Because I'm not anti what's happening with AI, but there's a lot of misunderstanding on what it can do and where it's at. So the budgets are becoming smaller because of market forces. They're becoming smaller because there's a perception they should be smaller because can't we do things faster now? And so we're trying to stay ahead of that, but it's hard reconciling that period of expansion with now this very rapid period of contraction. And it's speaking in dollars anyway. That's the issue that we've been facing in the last couple of years.
So I guess maybe now would be a good time to talk a little bit. We've alluded to it in some of the comments that you made, Ali, but exactly what have you guys decided to do? What was the announcement that came out a couple weeks ago, and what is your perspective or your strategy with Bitcoin for Forager?
Yeah, so it honestly, everything kind of happened unexpectedly, but also very organically. Because earlier this year, we were, like Ali mentioned, things were really slow. We were having a liquidity crunch, and we were just kind of thinking of our options, what can we do to fix this? And we were thinking, do we pull more money from the credit line? But that's a little bit too aggressive with the interest rates. Do we just lend money ourselves, to the company? But that's basically all the pressure on us as founders to sustain the whole thing. And there's no promise really that we're going to be able to turn this around. So we were just kind of brainstorming, and we knew we had the Bitcoin treasury there sitting in a very healthy levels. But of course, as Bitcoiners, we don't want to sell the Bitcoin. But we just didn't know if that was like it was going to come down to that. So we thought, of course, about borrowing against the Bitcoin, and we know there are services that do that. It was honestly like a little bit intimidating still because like there are all the different. It would be the first time we do it, and I know there are all these terms sometimes. Also like margin requirement and just details that I don't think we were ready to take too much risk on. So we just came up with the conclusion that we could set it all up ourselves. Like we could borrow against our Bitcoin, like as founders, do like a founders type of round, but structure it as a 5-year bond. And because we wanted it to work on our terms. So the 5 years I learned from Saylor, that buys him a lot of time, to like be able to sustain a Bitcoin winter. And like if you get Bitcoin time, it eventually is going to come back. Then we didn't want any liquidation rules or no coupons until mature. So full repayment at maturity. So it was kind of like the ideal situation. And on top of that, we also said that 35% of that amount was going to go to our Bitcoin treasury, so that that Bitcoin treasury just keeps growing no matter what. So in a way, it was kind of like we figured it out. Like this is protects the treasury, protects us. It works on our terms. And once we did that, we were like, wouldn't it be cool to just make all this public? Because I think it's a cool way to like kind of deal with this liquidity situation that I'm sure many companies in our industry are facing. And on top of that, we can just make it official that we have been, growing this treasury for years now, and we now want to make it a priority that we are going to keep growing this treasury. And I feel like it was a strong message, for many ways. And we figured that it could lead to other opportunities in the future. We have been thinking about opening a creative studio soon, and we were thinking, like we could structure loans just like this to maybe fund some of these new projects. And so we were just kind of thinking this could be a core part of the company, and that's why we made it official, and we just kind of announced it.
I love this story on so many levels because Israel and I, when we've been talking to Bitcoin-focused technology companies, almost all of them have Bitcoin in their treasury, or they take Bitcoin as their primary payment source, so they're accumulating Bitcoin. And it's really shifted the whole way an early stage tech company even thinks about growing or raising funds. What we found is that they tend to raise earlier. They're more conservative about their cash, but they need less venture funding or outside funding as they grow because of the Bitcoin has given them a little bit of a cushion. And it's really fascinating to me how you guys have turned, it was kind of a speculative investment in 2019, 2020, into this creative way of protecting yourself as founders, but also giving your business the ability to weather a challenging situation. As I think there's so much change going on right now in the creative space. I'm sure that it just really gives you that comfort level. And it also sets a model. I mean, I went through the comments on your Instagram from a lot of and the Twitter, and it feels like a lot of your clients or other creatives watched you and had been thinking about it themselves. But I think you're really leaders in your industry and in your space for what you've done. So would love to hear some of the feedback you've gotten from your clients or from your artists that you work with or from other people in the industry.
Yeah, I was just saying to Carlos before this, because I had another call, as I'm having a lot of these follow-up calls since this announcement, to people who are curious about what this all means. And we were actually a bit nervous maybe to make this public announcement because we were really confident in our strategy and what we had discovered, and that we have an amazing tool here that we were sitting on, didn't even quite grasp it until recently, but at the same time, we didn't have a full read on how our industry views this technology and how it can be used. Didn't expect any like real backlash, but maybe more questions. And we've had questions, but a lot of just really positive feedback, or people going, "Oh my gosh, I've been into this since 2014, and I do have a little bit of this and that, and I want to talk to you more about, yeah, how you see this funding creative projects in the future, et cetera." So actually, the response has been amazing, and it's like I don't know, everyone feels more comfortable now talking about the fact that they have been interested and they see a value in this, speculative asset that isn't maybe not just speculative anymore. So yeah, the response has been great, and it has introduced us to people also now around the world who are very into this and looking for creative partners. So it has been just like it's opened another door. It's opened another door to another audience, and that's been really valuable just in the short term right now for interesting conversations.
Yeah, I love what you mentioned earlier, Carlos, that this Bitcoin allowed you to address this liquidity situation for your business on your own terms, right? And I think you're spot on not getting yourselves into things that you weren't comfortable with or didn't understand. I mean, it sounds like you guys have thought through this in a very smart way. So, I mean, congratulations, first of all. But the actual structure that you guys went through as well, I mean, for creatives, you're thinking in financial terms ahead of many people in traditional finance even. And I love the fact that you guys structured this and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 5-year period, 5%, a third of the proceeds roughly being used for additional BTC acquisition. And it actually sounds a lot like, it reminds me of, I believe it's Battery Finance, the guys behind the also big Bitcoin bonds that have, been pretty public lately. And it's essentially just, I mean, the core pillars of it, from my point of view, are precisely what you guys structured in your own, in your own creative bond process, which was recognizing that as long as you're not risking yourself to the short-term volatility and viewing this in a 5-year time frame, in your case, midterm, it's an appreciating asset against a currency that's continually being devalued, and the risk return profile just ends up being, quite attractive there. And I think you guys are setting a great example and it sounds like for many from the feedback that you were mentioning, Ali, which is I think just admirable that you guys went public with this in that regard. Can you tell us a little bit about the access to capital for a business in your industry? I mean, is it typically, what were your other alternatives? You alluded a little bit to this, Carlos, but why consider Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not obviously familiar with every company in our industry, but we are definitely on the smaller boutique side of when it comes to production and post-production. I assume that the big corporates, like our competition, like the big houses, they have much more access, to like investors and liquidity, than like the smaller boutique places. I think that most people in our level depend more on the traditional finance type of tools. So like a lot of line of credits, a lot of like, like business loans, those kinds of things, which are there, but it just takes time sometimes to like figure these things out. And it just kind of happened to be there, right? Like we had the Bitcoin, we had our own keys, like borrowing against it. It was just a matter of setting up a contract and making sure that we were hitting all these boxes. But yeah, I think it just made sense. And I think we went through a whole Bitcoin winter, and we saw FTX. We saw everything that happened in that time. So I feel like we were both a little bit also paranoid. We wanted to make sure that we were addressing every single like risk factor of setting up something like this. And also because in the future, if we want to open this up a little bit more, we want to make sure we're taking all the responsibilities necessary.
And just to add to that too, we still control our company in doing this. We're not now bringing in people who we need to give points to, consider. Carlos and I get along so well, and we always come to a consensus on what we feel is best for our company, and that is, I know, a really rare thing. And if we were to start taking investors and needing to include them in certain types of decisions, it would be so complicated and really take away from the way that Carlos and I want to be running this company together, without needing to take so many opinions into consideration and maybe watering down our mission. And being able to do this against an asset that we own, and yes, we will be giving an interest rate to those who are loaning the money for a project for our operations, and then helping us build this treasury. We'll owe them that money back at maturity, but it's still just Carlos and I. It's still our company, and that was really important to me as well.
Yeah, Bitcoin is, I think, at its foundation about self-sovereignty. And so I think this just is a really great example about how you can continue to be sovereign as founders of your business and run the creative. I think in your industry, probably as much or more than any other. I mean, the creativity really depends on the two of you. And so you don't want an investor that is that doesn't understand the process to get involved with the decision making. So that's a really fascinating aspect of it. Yeah. And then, I mean, do you see, so you have people asking you how you do this? I mean, did you have a lawyer involved, or did you, yeah, I mean, because you probably know a lot more about Bitcoin and what's possible with it than many other legal or accounting professionals that are out there. I think it's a small universe of people who can help set something like this up. So just wondered how you went about the documentation process.
I've become really good at prompting ChatGPT. So a lot of it came with that. I've also learned that I even yesterday, I asked ChatGPT if it could pretend to be Joe Carlosari to review some documents. And so I know that if Joe approves, or at least fake Joe approves, so we're somewhere there. But no, because this one was a prototype, we just kind of set it up internally. We know like we were not gonna, we just kind of wanted to get something done. So ChatGPT has been really useful to set up, these documents and also presentations, because it's already learning like our strategy. So it's been really useful for that sense. But of course, if we want to open this up to other third parties, we're probably going to be drafting in ChatGPT, maybe sending it to like the experts to actually check them over. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it all was just kind of very organic.
I want to shift a little bit direction of the conversation to what is at the core of what you do. And so one of the things Israel and I were just so impressed with your announcement, the way you did it in such a creative way. You had the series of Instagram Q&A posts of questions that you were getting from friends and associates and things. And I just felt, people always say Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing department, and it doesn't. And I think that's really held back its adoption compared to other digital assets. But, the way you just distilled down these, very, very common and complex questions into simple phrases, and the responses you gave was just beautiful. So would love to hear a little bit more about how you view, how you went about that process. And also, just kind of let's chat a little bit more about how we can all be better communicators about Bitcoin.
I think as Ali was mentioning earlier, we were trying to be very careful with the messaging, because we did not know what the reaction was going to be. Like all of a sudden, like all we post on social media is our work and the beautiful frames that we, work on and things. But so this Bitcoin announcement came out of the blue. And funny enough, it got a lot of engagement, like more engagement than a lot of the work that we do. And we were getting some questions on DMs, but also people texting me. Ali was also getting some questions. And as a Bitcoiner, I was familiar with all these, just because it's the classic, diversification? What about other cryptos? Or are you guys mining now? What does this mean? We were responding to all these anyway, so I figured, it would be useful to kind of address all these publicly. But as I was kind of building that like FAQ, I was like, this would be more fun in stories, and like with some humor. And I don't want to dox the people asking the questions, so maybe we'll just decorate those a little bit and just make it funny. So we kind of created content out of, like the questions that we were being asked. And I was telling Ali, like our account views skyrocketed that week. Like, and we just thought it was funny because it was literally text over black, like about like super nerdy questions, but our community really liked it. So, or at least they were very intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, Carlos is the design brains behind what we do. Whenever I draft something, he will go, "Thank you for the copy," and then go and put it into something that looks really nice. So, he applied his skills to this, and it was perfect. I do think that as I have tried to catch up in my Bitcoin knowledge since we've been talking about this, this treasury plan, that I found a lot of it for good reason to be, like very, very technical. You get drawn into rabbit holes easily, and it is hard to distill into bite-sized pieces. And that's because it is very complex, and its uses are still being discovered. So that is really exciting, but also overwhelming to someone who is just getting into this space. And with how quickly information, moves and things change in this world, also can feel like you read something one week and the next week maybe that's not the right application or the right way to think about it. So I think if Bitcoin had a marketing department, it would probably have a lot of different departments that specialized in certain aspects of Bitcoin, and making it more visual, like we were able to do with some of the questions we were getting, is helpful for connecting ideas and how people have viewed this technology and this asset. So, for me anyway, too, I'm much more like a visual learner, and Carlos has showed me many charts in the last couple of weeks, and it's been great. I'm like, thank you for that, because I've had a couple of epiphanies just by being able to, visualize the way that these assets work. So I do think that we could use more creativity in the presentation of the information.
We'll say also, I think I wouldn't change a thing about Bitcoin Twitter. Like I think it attracts the right kind of person, like kind of like me, like very curious, very nerdy. Like I consume all that, like in my free time. But I think as Ali and I, as communicators, I think if we were assigned to sell kind of like the Bitcoin ethos to a broader audience, I think we would focus more on like how it affects humans, like, or human stories around that. So instead of it being about self-sovereignty, it would be maybe more about like, I don't know, like greed, or just emotions, that everyone feels. And I think I'm thinking of maybe like The Big Short, like very complex kind of themes, but it works as a film because it's really about just the emotions that all these big characters, the colorful characters have. So I think there's a lot to be explored there.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And, I love everything you guys just touched on, because, and it is very welcomed. It is certainly very welcomed, a new approach to this, because you were kind of mentioning, Ali, it can be a bit overwhelming, right? I mean, at its core, something quite complex, technical, completely new, because we've never had a system quite like this. So, I mean, you do need to have creative ways to distill decentralized digital scarcity. I mean, like, you need a better way to approach this into, a little more simple terms of just viewing this as a powerful savings tool, which it reaches everyone, and it should reach everyone, right? And your point there, Carlos, with just tapping into the emotions, I think is spot on. because you remove some of these technical aspects, and it is a lot of it is about fear, greed, ambition, hope. Like that's what we're all kind of actually going through as we first learn about why this current monetary system doesn't serve the 99% of us, and why then is Bitcoin a solution. So I really applaud you guys for your creative approach to the announcements and to the education. And yeah, I'm not sure if you guys particularly feel this exact way. I suspect yes, but I think once you truly understand and begin to learn what Bitcoin is, there is a part of you that wants to communicate it in a better way to the rest of, I mean, you want others to also have a protection to what we're going through and what's coming. So being able to just speak in simple terms and reach a broader audience is just extremely powerful. And maybe shifting a little bit more towards, present forward, what's next for Forager, and both the company and how you plan on growing from here now that you're financially stronger. And also Bitcoin, do you plan on integrating it in other ways into your business? Maybe, paying salaries or accepting it as payment, or maybe just continuing to give back to the community in this educational component of letting others know how this has served you guys. Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts there for going forward?
Those are all great points, and we're thinking about how we can address all of them. So we know that in the immediate, we want to set up this creative studio with Bitcoin-backed bonds that we're using right now just for Forager's operations at the moment, and overcoming any current economic uncertainties. But because, like Carlos had said earlier, we feel like we found a way to expand our treasury and use Bitcoin to fund projects, why not turn it into a creative studio where we can really make some content that we're like we've always wanted to, but maybe we couldn't tack it onto a client project. If it's a director's cut for a spot, we do those a lot, and then we end up doing this kind of spec work for free. But what if we could build on that, and not not only pay the artist for the time they're putting into the spec work that's ultimately building reels, and as a friend of mine said, is like a business card for them, but we can fund feature films and other passion projects that the people that we represent right now have always wanted to get made, but have not had the financial means to do so. And again, we'd still be able to do it without dilution from our partnership. So in the short term, we're working on creating this content studio. We are exploring Bitcoin-backed incentives for the artists we work with. We aren't in the process of accepting Bitcoin payments or paying salaries or anything in Bitcoin yet. Of course, we are very interested in what that could look like, but as far as we know, we're the only company in our industry even utilizing Bitcoin as a treasury right now, and getting clients on board with paying us in Bitcoin, or accepting, artists accepting Bitcoin payments is going to be a huge hurdle. And I think we need to see a bit more adoption in, Bitcoin in that way before we can do so. But I mean, obviously we would be 100%, for it. And yeah, Carlos, I feel like
I'm just
No,
sitting
I
there are
mean,
other things we could talk about.
because I think you need more Bitcoin companies as clients. I mean, and I hope that maybe this will kind of illuminate. I mean, I think Bitcoiners love to work with Bitcoiners, but you're representing traditional clients, including some incredible ones, but in big names. But I think, I think it would be a great opportunity to kind of expand your work, or to see what potential there is in Bitcoin companies that could tell a better story too. I don't know if that's on your roadmap too, but it should be.
I mean, absolutely. Like it's that would be the dream to like not only have a client that is paying you for your services, but you kind of all are building towards like the same messaging ultimately. So that's of course the goal. One thing I was gonna add, what Ali was saying is that I feel like now we're kind of setting three different paths. Like Ali was saying, we have the creative studio, we have right now our current post production company that's still doing its thing, and I'm going to be leading more of the Bitcoin treasury side. So I feel like we have realized that this Bitcoin element is crucial to our operations. So we also want to focus our attention in like making sure that this is growing even more rapidly. Because if we want to be able to fund all these projects, we first want to make sure that our treasury is always healthy and growing, so we can create more of these products and making sure we're watching all our leverage and everything.
Sounds like there's a lot going on for you guys right now, and this will, I think, prove to be quite an impulse for your business. And it was all just proactive work from your end, and being able to adapt and see opportunity, and I guess not being afraid of new technology as well, right? I mean, I think it's still such an opportune moment and such a big lesson. I mean, I think you guys' story is very powerful. And even though we tend to think that we're a bit late to some of these things, I think 10 years from now we'll continue thinking that. So it's just important to take those steps. And that being said, maybe as we begin to wind down the episode today, I'd like to hear if you guys have any words of advice. I mean, you've gone through quite a journey, I imagine, these past 4 or 5 years, both on building your business and then as well incorporating now Bitcoin into your treasury, and that I'm sure has come with lots of ups and downs. Any pieces of advice out there for just generally for entrepreneurs and also for people looking at Bitcoin for the first time and considering it?
I mean, on the Bitcoin side, I would suggest I kind of love our journey because it was very slow and it was a very slow adoption. And I feel like with Bitcoin, you have to take your time because we had to go through that. We had to buy it first, then understand it, then go through the bear market, have our doubts in the bear market. We felt silly at some point. But I think it's worth everyone getting a little bit, even businesses, just to experiment with it. And I feel like all the building comes afterwards.
Ali, you have anything to add?
Carlos summed it up perfectly. He's like the Bitcoin strategy expert on our side. But as Israel had said earlier, once you learn and understand this tool, you do sort of want to go out into the world and tell everybody about how it can protect them from what is happening right now. At least from protection against inflation and I think beyond distilling it down into something that can be understood easily from the people who aren't super familiar with it. It is also finding analogies. And I've heard also, because I was listening to some episodes of this podcast before, and I wish I'd found you guys sooner. I have a lot of listening to do. It's been so great. But someone had said, they wanted to understand it beyond analogies, which is so valid. And I think I've also been trying to understand Bitcoin beyond analogies. But for someone, if you're trying to orange pill someone, analogies are perfect. And, so as we try to find a way to spread the message of what we are doing, why we are doing it, finding that balance between the technicality and the analogies is going to be something I think we're still working on and exploring ourselves. But bottom line, we do see this as a super important tool, and we want everyone to take a good look at it and just maybe start putting little investments in, doing that dollar value averaging, then or dollar cost averaging, which is what we do ourselves and see how it goes in the long term. But it's definitely a long-term solution, not something to, you know, to use in the short run.
Well, I'm so excited that that your story is being told and told more broadly, and I hope it inspires more creativity in telling of the story. I hope that a community builds around what you're doing, and the new creative studio, and better design, better video, better better personal storytelling around it. So I can't wait to see this kind of take bloom, and I wish you just great success with bringing along more of your creative counterparts in this journey to help them, sustain some of these changes that the industry is going through, but also help us all be more effective in communicating the story of Bitcoin and what its benefits are. Israel, any other questions?
No, I think it's a great spot to end. I mean, I guess where can people find you both, Carlos and Ellie, and learn more about Forager?
Well, you can find us on Instagram. We've set up our X account, which is how you found us, and our website. We're on those three, and we have some email addresses on our website. You can either DM us on X or Instagram. We have some emails on our website if you want to reach out directly.
And I hope you'll be part of the speak at Bitcoin conferences too, and kind of spread the word and give us all a little bit more advice about how to communicate a little bit more effectively.
I'd love to meet Preston at some point and thank him.
We'll try and make that happen. So.
I'm sure it'll happen. And, hey, congrats on everything you guys are working on. We'll include some of those links that you mentioned in the show notes. And I encourage anyone to go to the website as well, because Bitcoin aside, you guys have some very amazing work. Thanks for coming on to the podcast. We had a great time speaking to you both today, and wishing much success.
Thank you. It was
Thank
great
you so
speaking
much.
with you.
Thanks for listening to the Build with Bitcoin podcast. If you found benefit in what you heard in this episode, we'd truly appreciate it if you would like, share, or leave a comment on whichever platform you're listening, as this helps others find us, which is especially important for a new podcast. And as a reminder, our content is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only, and is not to be considered investment advice or a recommendation to invest in any company or asset mentioned in the podcast. Build with Bitcoin is a proud affiliate partner of River, a full-service, 100% reserve custody, Bitcoin-only financial services company. For your next Bitcoin purchase, use our exclusive link, partner.river.com/buildwithbitcoin. Thank you sincerely for being a part of the Build with Bitcoin community.